It is 6 p.m., and as the current president of the Holmen Board of Education, I call the October 24th, 2022 annual meeting and budget hearing to order. The notice of this meeting was published on October 10th and on October 21st. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. At this time, I would like to recognize the members of the Holmen Board of Education. So board members, please rise when I state your name. Thank you to Gary Dunlap, Brian Wolpat, Chris Lau, Barb Wench, Bridget Todd Robbins, Maggie Smith, and Student Representative Alan Fox. We appreciate all that you do. Next, I would like to recognize our district officials and would like to ask all district officials to stand at this time. We appreciate all that you do. Next, I would like to thank Stacy Lockington for her help in preparing the annual meeting. Okay, moving on to item 1.6, which is the district administrator's report. I welcome District Administrator Dr. Kristen Mueller to present.
All right, good evening. Thank you everyone for coming this evening. Thank you, and I'm honored to be with you tonight to share about our district. What you see before you is our district strategic plan. This was developed with many stakeholders and input from them, and what this is showing us is what was most important to them. This drives our work and our decision making in the School District of Holmen, and tonight I will give an update on what happened in 21-22 and what's ahead. As many of you have seen around our district, our vision, which describes who we are, is belong, serve, succeed. And what our purpose is and what we do every day is our mission of preparing students for tomorrow through an engaging and inclusive educational community today. These here, empowerment, equity, excellence, integrity, safety. These are our core values. This is what we believe in. These are in what guides us as to who we are and what we do. Then up here you can see we have 5 focus areas which drives our work in the district. Student learning, fiscal, workforce, community engagement, and health and safety. You will find when you came in this evening there was a full annual report with these focus areas in it, and we have developed measures so that we can ensure that we monitor our progress and our overall organizational health. I'm going to get into more details here on some of those measures. So this past year, the School District of Holmen graduated 294 graduates. The year before, the class of 2021 had 266 graduates with a 95.7 graduation rate. If in the graph in front of you here, you can see, and throughout the majority of these graphs, the red diamond represents Holmen. The green square represents our green triangle, represents the state average, and then the blue square represents our peers. These graphs represent the state results from our Wisconsin Forward exam, which is given to students in grades 3 through 8. It provides how students are growing and achieving academically in ELA and math. In 2021, Wisconsin 4 data illustrates that the School District of Holmen, like most districts, was impacted with the COVID-19 pandemic. In ELA, our district continued, though, to outperform the state and our peers, with a 46.7% of our students achieving proficiency. Our math achievement was more significantly impacted, with 36.7% of students scoring proficient and placing us slightly below the average of our peers, but still above the state average. This is one area we continue to work on our outcomes. Our district ELA and math curriculums teams are examining our curriculum and are ensuring that we have a well-aligned, rigorous curriculum delivered through the most effective instructional practices to support all of our students in their growth and achievement throughout the district. And I just want to thank all those that continue to work on that. This is a picture of our composite score on our ACT. This is a state assessment taken by all 11th graders. Similar to our other state assessments, this, as you can see, not only affected us, but also our peers in the state average. We were right in a line with a 19.1. This is an area that we will closely continue to monitor and be working on to ensure that we have gains coming up in the next years. Then getting into funding. Displayed here is a chart of federal funds known as ESSER funds, or Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. This is funds related to the pandemic. The CARES Act in March of 2020 was created, and it created the ESSER 1 funds. The School District of Holmen received, as you can see in the blue area on the chart, $209,007. All of these funds were expended towards continued learning and reopening of our schools. In the orange or peach area, that is a display of our ESSER 2 funds. These were as a result of the coronavirus response and relief supplemental appropriations. They must be spent by this June of 2023. I'll be showing you a pie chart on the next slide with additional detail to how these funds were, or what funds we have spent thus far this year. The initial School District of Holmen allocation was $400,237 based on our what's called our Title I Part A formula, which is based off of our number of low-income students. But then also, on October 15th, we received an additional $734,162, and this was based on in-person instruction that we did provide during the pandemic. Then in the green area, it shows the dollars provided from the America Rescue Plan Act. Those are ESSER 3 dollars. Our initial allocation was $899,655, once again, off of our low income numbers. But then we also, due to having in-person instruction, we received an additional $750,259 for a total of over $1.6 million. I do want to note that 20% of these ESSER 3 dollars must go towards evidence-based improvement strategies. And what that means is those dollars must go directly towards improving instruction and improving directly to our kids in our classroom. So as I mentioned, this displays our ESSER 2 funds that have been distributed. We've distributed so far this year through June of 2022, $787,000 approximately. The largest portion was spent on payments to vendors. This was primarily for substitute needs and supports in the buildings. The next largest was salary and benefits, and this was for some of our new hires, which was part of that evidence-based instruction dollars, and adding additional instructional coaches and our social and emotional educators, learning educators. The part that shows you payments to Wisconsin School District, that reflected our participation in online virtual academies. That's our CRVA, Cooley Regional Virtual Academy, and our Holmen Virtual Academy that we provided. and still do provide to our secondary students. And then technology services included network security assessment and some one-to-one devices. And then our general medical supplies represents primarily air filters, where the capital equipment were larger tables for spacing. This pie chart displays our district's permanent staff by classification group. The largest group is our professional educators, with educational assistants following. These groups work directly with our students on a daily basis. Some districts contract out for transportation and nutrition services. As you can see, we hire all of our staff in-house, and we have over 600 employees in our organization. Once you have your employees, it's important to retain them. So we continue to have high retention rates in the majority of our staff categories. High retention rates are a strong indicator of staff satisfaction. Retirements are not included in this data here. As you can see from the graph, administrative assistants have a 95% retention rate, 93% for drivers, and 92% for our teachers. Our retention rate for administration dropped to an all-time low of 87%, with an increase in retention rate of educational assistants. Open enrollment. This is the option that allows parents to apply for their child to attend public school in a district other than the one in which they reside. Any Wisconsin resident in 4K to grade 12 may apply to attend a non-resident school district. The graph displays the open enrollment net, which is the overall difference between the number of students leaving the district and the number of non-resident students enrolling into the district. As you can see, this data is lagging a little bit. This is from the 21-22 school year. We've been tracking this as we continue to go on, and we have actually been having a trend upward since this. This is something we're going to continue to monitor closely, and we'll be looking to improve over the next 3 years and on. Annually, our parents are also surveyed about their satisfaction with the district. Our goal is to have 90% or higher. As you can see from our chart here, our parent satisfaction is at 91.9% even during through our COVID-19 pandemic. And student safety is always at the forefront. Our students are asked the question, are asked to respond to the statement, "My school is safe." Students are asked to think about safety in the classroom, hallways, sidewalks, playgrounds, in order to choose the answer that best reflects how safe they feel at school. In the spring of 2022, excuse me, the school district had dropped below our goal of 90% to 89%. This is something we are continuing to focus on and making improvements on for the 22-23 school year. So a few other things to celebrate from this past year. We had 4 schools make the U.S. News and World Report Best Schools. Prairie View, Sand Lake, and Evergreen were named the best elementaries, and this is based on performance on state assessments, school size, student-teacher ratios. And Holmen High School was named the best high school based on their performance on state assessments and how well they prepare students for college. We want to share about our nutrition services team. They continue to provide outstanding service. They served over 910 breakfasts daily, 2,500 lunches daily, over 120 senior meals in Onalaska and Holmen, and over 90 lunches to the YMCA. So we thank them for that service. Our transportation department, they made over 4,250 trips for students to and from school this past year. And then our facility services team maintains over 800,000 square feet of facilities and 200 acres of property. So it just gives you an idea of how much is going on in the School District of Holmen on a daily basis. Then, celebrations. Oh. Would just like to share about our 2021 state appearances. We made state appearances, the Holmen Dance Team, DECA, Soul Ensemble, Mathletes, and the Fall Play. We also had many individual qualifiers. I can say Holmen definitely made a mark on the map. And we also made state appearances in many of our athletics. I seem to be missing that slide now. So we made state appearances in volleyball for the first time in history, and wrestling, both boys and girls, and we also made state appearance in, I'm missing one, I so apologize. But we made more state appearances than we have in many past years, so congratulations to the efforts of all of our students. And then we couldn't do all this in our district without community partnerships. We are very thankful to have our partnerships with our YMCA, who provides surround care, the BGC that also provides care and activities for our students. We're thankful for our Holmen Area Community Center, the Rotary Club, Knights of Columbus, Holmen Area Foundation. And then also want to really thank our Village of Holmen, our La Crosse County, and our Town of Holland for their partnership we're able to get the roundabout out here at the intersection, and that will start this upcoming summer. So thank you to everybody and all their partnerships to make great things happen in our community. And lastly, this is, I'm not going to go into detail on this one. For the upcoming 22-23 school year, we have defined more specific goals to reach our long-term goals of our strategic plan. And as I talked about some areas that we're focusing on for improvement, they are shown here in our upcoming goals for the 2023 school year. Lastly, we want to tell you, please go out and vote on November 8th. There will be 2 questions brought before the voters for a referendum. The first question is for $650,000. $450,000 of that is to renew our current technology referendum, and the other $200,000 is to develop funds for maintenance upkeep. And that would be an estimated cost of 33 cents per month for a $100,000 home, or 99 cents per month for a $300,000 home. And then question 2 is for the $74.75 million, excuse me. This is for building improvements, mainly at our middle school, Evergreen and Viking. And that would be an estimated cost of $1 per month on a $100,000 home, or $3 per month on a $300,000 home. And lastly, thank you all, everybody, our community, parents, school district staff, volunteers, and our board members. Thank you so much for everything you do to keep our district running and in great health. So thank you. And that concludes the district administrator report. Okay, one last thing. Now I'd like to introduce Sven Strutz. He is our district attorney, and he is going to share with us how things will run for our annual meeting this evening.
Good evening. As she indicated, I'm Sven Strutz. I'm an attorney with the firm of Weld, Riley & Eau Claire, and I represent the Holmen School District. And I don't know how to run a microphone, apparently. I want to make some preliminary remarks before I hand over to you, the electors. The roots of the school district's annual meeting can be traced back to the country's founding and New England town meetings. These annual meetings are the last vestige of true grassroots direct democracy. Over the course of time, a school district became too complicated to be run directly by the electors, and so the legislature created school boards and over time delegated more authority to those school boards. Over the years, there have been a series of court cases that have defined what is properly the role of the Board of Education and what is the jurisdiction of the school board at the expense of electors. Unless a particular question is specifically spelled out in the statutes as being within the jurisdiction of the electors, that question is for the school board to decide. For example, the budget is not an action item on the agenda. The Attorney General has advised that the governing body cannot be, by governing body I mean school board, held to make changes suggested by citizens at the hearing on the proposed budget. In addition, while electors do have the authority to vote on a tax to operate the district, the school board ultimately may have to make adjustments to that tax if it is insufficient or greater than what is needed. But despite its limited power, the annual meeting is still required by state law, and the electors of the district are charged with taking certain actions during an annual meeting. With this in mind, the agenda tonight addresses items which require approval of electors who are present. We will be following the published agenda. There will also be an opportunity to raise additional issues as long as those issues are meeting. I am responsible this evening for assisting the chair and running an orderly meeting. We will use Robert's Rules of Order. My experience has been that these meetings run the smoothest if we use the following procedure. First, wait for the chairperson to call on you. Then when that happens, please stand and identify yourself. Indicate the municipality in which you reside. If you are making a motion, it's important that the clerk is able to record the precise motion that you're making, so we might need to ask you to repeat that so that everybody's on the same page about what motion is being considered. Once a motion has been made and seconded, we request that who speaks in favor of the motion be followed by somebody who is opposed, and we toggle back and forth until everybody has said everything that needs to be said about that particular motion. After speaking, you cannot speak again on that same issue unless no one else wants to speak. For the purposes of time conservation, we ask that people limit their presentations to 5 minutes for each. Votes will be decided orally. If requested by any elector, we can do a hand count for purposes of accuracy. Also, if a majority of the electors request this, we can also use Wisconsin Statute 120.08, sub 3, only electors are eligible to vote. That means residents who are over the age of 18 and have been residents of the district for more than 28 days before today. If there is a challenge to any voter, I end up issuing an oath to that challenged individual, and then as long as they take that oath, they are allowed to vote. Does anybody have any questions about these procedures? Seeing none, the first step that you folks have to the first thing that you folks have to decide tonight is who you're going to be for tonight's meeting. Nominations do not require a second. I will ask 3 times for additional nominations and then close nominations. I request that you do not move to close the ballot. You will then vote on the persons nominated. If there's only one person nominated, your job is easy. If there are 2 people nominated, the chair will be determined by majority of those voting. If there are 3 or more nominees, again, a majority of those voting will determine who is elected chair. If there is no majority, the least vote getter will drop out and we will re-vote. If there's a tie for the least vote getter, we will flip a coin to determine who is forced to drop out. If anybody has any, then I would like somebody to nominate someone to serve as the chairperson for tonight's meeting.
Barbara White, Town of Holland, I nominate Jennifer
Okay. Any additional nominations? Going once? Going twice? We have one nominee, Jennifer Deek. All those in favor? Vote. All those opposed? With that, I hand things over to Ms. Deek.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 4. A copy of the minutes for the October 25th, 2021 annual meeting has been included in the annual report booklet. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the 2021 annual meeting minutes as presented?
Somebody's
Okay. Do I need to repeat that? Okay. Okay, a copy of the minutes for the October 25th, 2021 annual meeting has been included in the annual report booklet. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the 2021 annual meeting as presented?
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented. Cheryl Hancock, the Village of Holmen.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Chris Law, Village of Holmen, I second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Any discussion on that motion? I'll ask a third time, is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item 5. The next order of business is the 2022-23 budget summary report. Our Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Julie Holmen, will present this report.
Yeah, just different. Sorry, we practiced this earlier today, and now it looks different, of course, on the screen. Good evening, and welcome to the annual meeting. Sven, I think I get more than 5 minutes, so. My name's Julie Holmen, Executive Director of Finance and Operations, and I'm here this evening to present the budget, the original budget for 22-23, and a proposed tax levy for certification. I apologize, the slides are not advancing on the laptop as we move down the screen. I'll begin with a timeline for our agenda this evening. Includes a budget timeline, perspectives and challenges, including the lags in revenue limit increases, Holmen wage commitments, current and historical enrollment, the budget summary in DPI format, key financial figures, and the recommended school tax levy for taxes payable in 2023. The development of the budget, it's kind of an ongoing process, but more specifically for the 22-23 budget, we began last July 1st, examining the development calendar at the board meeting level. In August of 21, so over a year ago, we conducted a district-wide facility audit, which is supporting the referendum that is coming to the voters in November. And also in September, we conducted an annual process where we have our administrators and directors submit their unmet needs through an annual submission process for consideration. In January, the preliminary input variables for forecasting were presented to the board to develop this 22-23 budget. Those variables have certainly been adjusted in our current economic environment. If only we knew everything last January for prediction. In June, the board examined the preliminary budget.
Sorry, just not advancing on the screen.
It's not advancing, it's not playing the slideshow, so.
There you go.
Okay. Excuse me, in June of '22, so this summer, the board examined a preliminary budget followed by a proposed budget in September, and this evening we present the original budget, which will be adopted for the 22-23 fiscal year, and also take a look at the recommendation for the tax levy certification. I'll begin with some perspectives and challenges for current and future budget planning. For 2 years, the state of Wisconsin did not increase the revenue limit, so for both the 21-22 fiscal year and 22-23, there was a zero change in the revenue limit per pupil. Of course, we do not know what the 23-25 biennium decisions will be at this time. We're anxious to see if more money for education is supported this spring. As Dr. Mueller mentioned, there are ESSER dollars that will be expiring. The ESSER 3 will expire in June of 2024. So we do have remaining federal dollars supporting pandemic relief that'll help support additional positions as well as potential HVAC projects for more mediation within our school district out of those funds. At that time, there will be an expiration of those dollars, and that's several millions of dollars that has come into the School District of Holmen that will be expiring. The per pupil revenue does lag behind inflation, and I will show you a chart on the next screen in regards to that lagging information. The state of Wisconsin spending on K-12 education has declined in rank nationwide. There has been a drop in the share of Wisconsin general purpose revenue and tax relief at the expense of the schools. In 2002, Wisconsin ranked 11th in the nation and 11% up above the national average in per pupil spending for public education. In 2020, Wisconsin ranked 25th, 56% below the national average, and those numbers come before the 2-year freeze in revenue cap, revenue per pupil. You would think I'd know how to use a PowerPoint, but when I advance the slide, it does not move, so I'm sorry. There we go. This chart demonstrates the lagging per pupil revenue in the state of Wisconsin. This is not specific to the School District of Holmen. This is an average chart across the state. In Holmen, it's actually reaching almost $3,900 per pupil. This chart dates back to 2008-09. Through 22-23, produced by Wisconsin Association of School Boards for our use. But this is the general chart of index for inflation, the blue line, versus the actual increase in per pupil spending, the orange line. The reason this is super important is because it's really challenging to keep up with wages based on inflation when we're not receiving new money or additional money indexed to inflation on the per pupil revenue. Maybe we should go back to the PDF. Additional perspectives and challenges include the need for additional mental health services and people to provide those services to our students and or staff, labor competition for both instructional staff and support staff, and our challenge to attract employees to the district. So several vacancies continue to be posted in various positions across the district. Operationally, just as you experience in your home budgets, fuel, food, supplies, etc., and trying to afford that in the school district. Last year, we saw significant increases in our utility expenses, our propane for our buses, our diesel, and our electric and gas bills in the district, just as you may have at home. In addition, capital increase costs for construction, capital maintenance, and the cost to borrow funds is a concern and future challenge. Special education funding support, the state of Wisconsin supports less than 30% of our special education eligible expenses. I will share a chart with you when I get to the special education budget so that you can see that further, but 1/3 of those costs are reimbursed by the state, and as you are familiar, most of you, the rest of it has to come from our general fund transfer so that that fund does not go into a deficit position. In addition, there's currently a legislative push to expand voucher and charter programming. Currently, vouchers to private schools pulls $1 million from the general aid to the School District of Holmen. And finally, not finally, I'm sure there's many more concerns, but concern about the increased use of fund balance for ongoing expenses will not be sustainable for very many years. I believe so. One moment. Next, I'll talk a little bit about wage commitments for this year and beyond. It's important to reflect on the increases for wages that actually began effective January 1st of 2022. What's that? PDF if you want. I shut the other one down. It's just stuck. Sorry.
Do you want to continue to talk about Susan?
I can try. So we're going to go back to January 1 and the wage commitments for our employees. Last January, per administrative recommendation, the board approved a mid-year wage increase for all employees. This was an unprecedented decision, as wages are typically increased at the beginning of the fiscal year or July 1st. The increase was reflective of our efforts to attract and retain employees in a very challenging employment environment so we could continue to provide the services to our students in our community. It's important in today's budget to understand this increase because it does impact wages going forward. It was not a one-time stipend for our employees, but an ongoing commitment. All employees at that time received $1 per hour increase. For our employees, that's pretty straightforward, but annualized for our salaried employees, that equates to $2,080 for a full-time annual employee at 260 days, 8 hours a day. And for educators who are contracted for 190 days, that equates to an annual amount of $1,520. And this went on to the base. The estimated impact at that time was just over $1 million, including Social Security, Medicare, and Wisconsin retirement. Last spring, we engaged in base wage conversations and negotiations with our staff in the School District of Holmen. The Holmen Education Association is the only union group, but we continue to apply similar practices to all of our employees in Holmen. So additional wage commitments for 22-23 effective July 1 included total base wage increases at 4.7%, and our groups include our hourly employees, non-affiliated, administrator and director, and educator groups. The hourly employee base wage increase total was $313,000, non-affiliated $8,800, administrative and director $123,000, and our educator, which does include our support educators as well, so our nurses, our counselors, social workers, those that may not be directly in a classroom but supporting the students, also licensed under the educator group. The total base wage at 4.7 was $826,000. In addition, the board approved a resolution last spring for additional supplemental educator wages, and that additional supplemental, $647,000, or an additional 3.7%. The estimated increase, including again Social Security and Medicare, estimated at $2.1 million. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about fall enrollment before we go through the budget summary. The fall enrollment in the state of Wisconsin is taken on the third Friday of September, and again we count on the second Friday in January. This year that landed on September 16th, and the head count was 3,889 students distributed across the 6 schools. This chart overlays the blue fall enrollment with our school building capacity in red. Evergreen's fall enrollment was 343, Prairie View 463, Sand Lake 388. The Viking has been adjusted downward from the previous slide because our 4K and early childhood come half a day, so there is sufficient space within the Viking square footage to accommodate those classrooms. The Holmen Middle School at 897 students, and high school at 1,215. Next, I'll go through a little bit of enrollment history. It's a perception in Holmen, because of all of our residential building, that we are growing. We do have more houses. But this is a 10-year historical chart on enrollment across the School District of Holmen. You can see that the gray bar at the top is not changing a whole lot. And on this chart, the black line represents our economically disadvantaged, or often we call it free and reduced lunch disadvantaged income in the School District of Holmen. As Dr. Mueller also mentioned, this is a measure that's often applied to determine district level of funding received from the federal government for various education awards and title programming. This chart is a 10-year enrollment history on ethnicity. It also has not changed very much over the 10 years, but there is some minimal change in showing growth of both Asian and 2 or more ethnicities. Otherwise, the large blue at 86+% continues to be most of the ethnicity of Caucasian in our school district. But we do have that growth, and we're working toward meeting all those needs of different ethnicities, and also trying to reflect that in the staff that we hire. So that's one of our efforts going forward as well. Next, I will go through the original budget summary. It has been provided in the back in the 5-page DPI format summary. Also, the publication was put in the La Crosse Tribune, the official newspaper, as required prior to the budget hearing this evening, and printed on the 10th of October. In September, the school board approved the proposed budget, so this presentation this evening has been updated. Since September, we have received the equalized property valuation certified by the Department of Revenue on October 1st, the third Friday count, as I just reviewed, and also the state aid certification on October 14th. We'll begin with the general operating fund. We call it Fund 10. And the first notable change I'd like to point out is the fund balance. So the bottom right-hand corner is the estimated fund balance in the general fund next June 30th of 2023 at $16,326,000. The total ending fund balance is budgeted to change or decrease by $2.8 million over June 30th of 2022. You can see that there are designations on the screen of different types of fund balance. The restricted fund balance, going from the unaudited 21-22 column to the original budget, is decreasing due to the dollars associated with the roundabout project. Those dollars have been in reserve since the 2017 Safety and Security Referendum, and $710 is going towards that project, which we are sharing with the Village of Holmen and the Town of Holland. So that is decreasing the restricted fund balance for next June. The committed fund balance in 2021, or June 30th of 2022, was $935,000. That one is also decreasing over the course of this year. We had reserved dollars for projects and facilities that were committed to vendors last year and did not get completed because of the current economic environment and the challenges in completing construction. So that also, committed fund balance, will be drawn down over the course of this year. The assigned fund balance, we do set aside dollars between now and each year between now and the end of September. The fiscal year starts on July 1st, but we are not paid by the state. The first state aid payment does not come until September, and we have operating expenses as well as educator wages to pay out over the summer for those that choose 26 pays, and so we reserve dollars for operational expenses in the assigned. This is a summary of local sources. Again, we're looking at the last column all the way to the right for the original budget. The middle column is 2021. We don't expect that it'll change, but it's considered unaudited until the school board accepts the financial statements and the audit, which will be coming in the next couple months. So the original budget, local sources, is estimated at $12,447,000. If you take a look at the tax line, you see a decrease from $13.1 million to $12.1 million. I will review the tax information throughout this presentation this evening. We are restricted in revenue by the state of Wisconsin, and so when the property tax levy goes down, it's because the state aid, general aid, went up. So I will share that information as we move through. Next is the subtotal of revenue from other school districts. This is the open enrollment in transfer. So students that are not residents of the School District of Holmen that open enroll into Holmen, we get an aid transfer from the state of Wisconsin. And in 2022-23, for a regular open enrollment student for regular education, that amount is $8,224 per pupil. And for special education, the amount is $13,076 per pupil. Both of those are up $63 from last year. Total revenue estimated from other school districts for this year is $1,745,000. Next is a revenue from state sources. We begin with the categorical aid at the top. This includes transportation aid and common school fund, also known as library aid. And next is the general aid. This year, this has been certified on October 14th at $33,344,000. The last line item there, the $3 million, other revenue. This is comprised primarily of the categorical per pupil, and that is outside of the revenue limit. It's also a dollar amount that has been frozen since 2020 at $742 per pupil. The total estimated revenue from state sources in the general fund is $36,830,000. Next, we look at the federal revenue in the general fund. You can see in the 3 years presented the increase in federal revenue, and this has to do with the ESSER funds specifically. In this budget for 22-23, it does include the remainder of ESSER 2 funding, as well as the initial portion of ESSER 3. So those two combined is $1.2 million. The rest of that money will be budgeted either in a revision this year or through next year, expiring in June of 2024. Subtotal for federal sources of revenue is $1,884,000. This is a summary of other financing sources towards the end of the general fund revenues. The item on the top, the other financing sources at $356,900, this has to do with the implementation of GASB 87, which is Government Accounting Standards Board Requirement 87. We had to implement that in 21-22 and make both a revenue and expenditure adjusting entry, and so that's why you're not seeing that in the year before or currently in the original budget. But it is on both the revenue and expenditure side, netting zero for that audit entry requirement. On the bottom is subtotal of other revenue sources. This is estimated at $138,000, and this is kind of where all the miscellaneous things go, such as E-rate, claims reimbursement from insurance claims, scrap, recycling, insurance dividends, etc. The total revenue and other financing sources in the general fund is estimated at $53,046,000. This is the distribution of the revenue in Fund 10. 69% of the money comes from the state, another 3.5% from the federal government. That is typically under 2% when we are not experiencing extra money from pandemic relief. And then locally, 23%, primarily made up of the tax revenue. I'll move on from revenue in the general fund to expenditures, beginning with instruction, subtotal estimated at $23.6 million. This section includes both educator and support staff working in instructional settings, as well as the associated supply material and equipment. Undifferentiated instruction, estimated at $8.2 million, is primarily our elementary school level, followed by regular curriculum, art, math, language arts, music, science, and social studies at nearly $12 million. And then we also have separate categories in the budget for vocational, physical, co-curricular, and other special needs. I'm really liking this podium. The expenditures for support services estimated at $20.2 million for 22-23. The increase, if you draw your eye to business administration, increasing from 7.8 to 9 million. This includes both the 500,000+ that was set aside to continue to finish the facility projects that had been started last year. More specifically, we have HVAC projects at Viking and the middle school that were committed to and bid out, but could not be completed because of the equipment not coming in by June 30th. And then the $710,000 for the Briggs McHugh roundabout contribution from the safety and security referendum. So that's the reason you're seeing an increase specifically in business administration. Next is the non-program transactions, estimated at $12 million. The interfund transfer is a combination of financial support for the special education costs at $6,570,000, plus an additional transfer for Fund 46 long-term capital and trust of $250,000. The instructional service payments of nearly $5.2 million are for the transfer open enrollment out. So in the revenue, we talked about the open enrollment in, and this is the area for the transfer out of aid to other districts that our resident students are attending. Again, that transfer per pupil is $8,224 for regular education and $13,076 for special education. It also includes $1,081,000 for combined regular and special education private school vouchers. Total estimated expenditures for the general fund, $55,873,000. This is a summary of slides you have already seen, but in a summary format. So we have our fund balance ending June 30th of 2022, which becomes our starting fund balance of $19.1 million. And we subtract add our estimated revenues for the year, subtract the estimated expenditures to get the ending estimated fund balance of $16.3 million. This is an expenditure distribution graph of the budget. It does include the special education fund minus the interfund transfer to special education. We don't want to count that expenditure twice, but I wanted to reflect the distribution with noting that salaries, benefits, and contracted substitute service costs make up about 76% of the total pie in expenditures for operations. Next, I will move on to the Special Projects Fund in the School District of Holmen. We call it the gift account, or Fund 21. The ending fund balance of June 30th, $1,233,000. Estimated revenues and expenses match, and the reason we do that is because the different gift accounts, of which we have, I believe, over 150 of, they're allowed to carry forward their balance. So as of July 1, everything's reconciled and it becomes their beginning budget for the year. And so we match that. We do not know how many gifts we're going to get in donations throughout the year, but we do expect that we will have a fund balance at the end of next year as well. So the revenue and expenditure budgets based on those carryover dollars, $993,000. This is also where we account for scholarship funds. And so the balance between the budget and the fund balance is the scholarship balance for future scholarship awards. This is a summary of the special education budget. You see at the top, zero fund balance. This is a fund that cannot go into a negative and requires an interfund transfer from the general fund every year. We estimate that interfund transfer this year to be nearly $6.6 million. The revenue and other financing sources totaling $9,882,000, matched by the same in the expenditure line. This is specific to special education revenue, and you see here 66% of the revenue for Fund 27 special education does come from the interfund transfer from the general fund. The balance of the revenue is primarily from state sources. Just under 30% of reimbursable expenses in special education are funded by the state of Wisconsin, followed by almost 9% in federal awards. Next, we have the Debt Service Fund, or Fund 39 in the School District of Holmen. This is voter-approved debt service based on capital referenda and outstanding bonds based on those referenda. The two bonds that we have outstanding in the School District of Holmen include the remainder of the Prairie View debt, which was refinanced in 2020, as well as the high school addition and remodel funding from the most recently completed project. The revenue is estimated at $7.9 million, and the expenditures for this year in debt service are estimated at $5.6 million. In the line at the very bottom, you see the estimated indebtedness that would be effective June 30th of 2023 at $17.7 million. If we apply any debt defeasance this year where we prepay debt, then that $17 million would be reduced and will be updated in future budgets. Next, we have the Capital Projects Fund. This includes both Fund 42 and Fund 46. Fund 42 is our construction fund. The reason there are expenditures for 2 years and not in the budget is because the construction fund for the high school addition and remodel was closed on April 1st. The balance within the Capital Projects Fund after the interfund transfer is estimated at $470,000 next June 30th, and that is in the Fund 46 Long-Term Capital Improvement Trust Fund. This fund was opened 3 years ago, and it needs to be open and funded for 5 years before we can begin spending money out of it, which is why there are not any expenditures identified in the budget for 22-23. School nutrition is accounted for separately in Fund 50. The beginning fund balance, July 1 of 2022, $1,688,000. Mr. Gasper primarily oversees this budget and plans on amending it throughout the year because a lot of this is very unpredictable right now for school nutrition. As you may be aware, for 2 years, the federal government provided free breakfast and lunch to our students, and this year we are back to paid meals, and then we do still have free and reduced, and the school district, with some of this fund balance, is providing free meals to those that would qualify or are eligible for reduced this year. The revenue estimate for 22-23 in school nutrition is $3,283,000, and the expenditure estimate is $3,578,000, drawing down on fund balance. The fund balance goal for school nutrition is 3 months worth of expenditures, so currently this is exceeding that goal, and there's some room to spend some of this down and to support those reduced price meals. Next is Fund 80, and this is where we account for our community service fund. This is where we support the Boys and Girls Club programming at the new Skogan Boys and Girls Club here in Holmen. The programming supported over there is for all resident students, not just those that are enrolled in the School District of Holmen, and that is a requirement of Fund 80 in the state of Wisconsin for community service. Items supported through this fund include an education director for our Sail to Success program, liaisons for parents, school and BGC, educational support, homework support, tutoring, play-based educational activities, as well as part-time assistants to help support the program. BGC is proud to say they're the biggest one in the area. Holmen grew really fast once they opened their doors, and we are happy to be able to help support the continued education beyond the school hours in the district. The estimated revenue for community service being proposed this evening in the tax levy is $200,000 with estimated expenditures of $100,000. The $200,000 will help to support cash flow and future programming. This is very helpful because, again, there are expenses that begin in July, and the tax proceeds do not start coming into the district until January and February, so 7 months after expenditures begin. That concludes the summary in DPI format of the original budget. Now, between that summary and the tax levy proposal, I'd like to go through some key financial information. On the screen, you see a side-by-side of the 21-22 and 22-23 information, and then the last column is the change year on year. This is important to understand, so when we talk about revenue limit caps and you hear that state aid went up, it's important to understand that the allowable general fund levy went down. So the September and summer full-time equivalent membership average 4,062. Membership is not the same as head count that was shared earlier. The head count was 3,889. Membership is calculated by removing the non-resident students that are attending, adding back in the resident students that are attending elsewhere, and then there's a ratio applied depending on the grade level. Summer school FTE is only counted at 40% in that calculation. So the 3-year average membership went down 7 from 4,069 to 4,062. The equalized property valuation certified by the Department of Revenue on October 1st, $2,518,413,000, and that was an increase of 12.93%. The revenue limit, no exemptions, actually went down $53,662. When we add back in exemptions, which include the technology referendum, we have a declining enrollment exemption, we have adjustments for prior year open enrollment pupils not counted, as well as the private school vouchers. The revenue limit, all exemptions, totals $45,342,000. An increase over last year of $26,000. Total aid was certified on October 14th at $33,344,000, reviewed earlier in state revenue for this year as part of the state revenue sources. That's an increase of $1,074,000. Like I said, that means our revenue limit for the amount of money that we can actually levy for the general fund operational budget is $11,918,000, a decrease of $1,048,000. The difference between those two is the 26. So the total levy being recommended this evening for the general fund is $11,918,263. The other components of the levy that are not part of the revenue limit formula include the debt service levy being recommended at $7.8 million and the community service levy being recommended at $200,000 for a total combined levy of $19,967,582. This is a combined levy increase of $1.3 million. Because of the 12+% increase in the property valuation, this actually equates to a decrease in the rate per thousand of 42 cents. So you see the calculation at the bottom of the screen. Last year, we certified a school tax rate of $8.35. The proposal this evening would be a school tax rate of $7.93. So a subtraction of 42 cents over prior year certification. Again, the total levy being recommended this evening for certification in November for taxes payable in calendar year 2023 is $19,967,582. It is an increase over prior year. The School District of Holmen has a long time history of trying to maintain a more level school tax rate. And it's been very difficult to do with the revenue limit capped and the decrease in our ability to tax in the operational fund. And so we have been applying more levy to the debt fund which is allowable because there is debt on the books. And so doing that, we can then prepay debt. It's called debt defeasance. Several of you were involved in that process last spring, where we defeased debt and we prepaid $1.5 million, saving the taxpayers $285,000 in interest on the debt. It also shortens the term then for that debt that you're defeasing. So the increase recommendation is $1.3 million, which is 7.27% on the total combined levy. And again, it is a decrease in the school mill rate of 42 cents. This is a side-by-side for that mill rate comparison. Last year, again, it was $8.35. The recommendation this year would be $7.93. And this is just an example of how that would impact a residential property owner with fair market property value in increments of $100,000, $200,000, and $400,000. This is a 10-year history on the school mill rate in the School District of Holmen. There's just a few of them that are identified on the screen, so since it's quite small. In 2014, the rate was $11.61. In 2021, it was $9.77. Last year, $8.35. And so I drew on the history chart the proposed 2023 rate of $7.93, just under the line, which represents $8. This is the summary of the proposed property tax levy that was included in the budget publication in the La Crosse Tribune, demonstrating 3 years, one audited, one unaudited, and then the recommendation for the tax levy this evening. This is a sample of the resolution that would go to the board later this evening after it goes to the electors in the new business section following this budget presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. We will now open the budget hearing up for public comment. So if you have any questions or comments for Julie, please come up to the microphone, state your name, address, and question or comment.
Hi, Julie. My name's Rick Hyden. I'm from the Township of Farmington, in the school district. I just have 2 quick questions, I think quick. In the budget summary, you mentioned local taxes. There's a line item in there called local sources 210 taxes. That's $12 million in the budget. Is that where the property tax element would fall?
Yep, I'm just going back to it, Rick, for us to take a look at on the screen. So property tax makes up the majority of the 12.1 million. Is that the line item that you're on?
Yep.
And then mobile home tax, as well as any residual things that we may get from the municipality, including the lottery tax credit from the county.
Follow up that, where would local sales tax come in? Like the 0.5 on the 5.5%?
We don't receive sales tax from local revenue.
Okay, none of that comes back to circulate.
So if that went to the state of Wisconsin through the Department of Revenue, then it would be part of their general appropriation back to the school district in state, state categorical or general aid.
Got it. My other question was on the debt service fund relative to the total revenues and other financing there under between 900 and 281. Yeah. Can you just explain that it's $7,910,000 in total revenue, and with debt service and revenue, to me they don't go together. When you talk about revenue in terms of debt servicing, where is the revenue coming in?
The revenue specifically to that portion of the tax levy certification, plus any interest earnings on the fund balance within that separate checking account.
Okay.
So the 7.9 million, I'm going to flip, sorry, to the levy certification itself. So if you look at the column 2223, $7,849,000 is being recommended for the debt service levy to apply towards both principal and interest due this year, as well as flexibility for debt defeasance to prepaid debt. And that does help. We've applied the strategy in the past. It does help to prevent that mill rate from dropping any more significantly than it is right now. So,
Okay.
and we can save money by prepaying the debt and saving that interest. So.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for the budget hearing? The third time, any other questions or comments? Okay, that concludes the budget hearing. Moving on to item number 7. We will move on to the treasurer's report provided by Director of Business Services, Crystal Mott, on behalf of the board treasurer, Gary Dunner.
I'm going to try the PowerPoint, see how it goes. So again, my name is Crystal Mott, Director of Business Services, and tonight I will be presenting the Treasurer's Report. We have a statutory obligation to present receipts and expenditures since the last annual meeting. You'll see the information on this slide includes amounts from our auditor's draft financial statements, as well as a reference to the unaudited budget information just presented by Julie. Again, she does have that budget document in the back of the room, and it will also be made available on the district website. While these are both labeled draft and unaudited, our audit is nearly complete, and I do not anticipate any changes to our 21-22 figures. The reason for the slight variations between the audit figures and the budget figures, again, as Julie mentioned, is that so interfund transfers do not get counted twice, and in funds where there are both revenues and expenses of the same amount to offset each other in or between those funds. At the bottom of the slide, the total revenue of all funds represents the sum of revenues in each fund, less any transfer made between funds. This total is $67,505,758. Again, this amount represents the total receipts of the school district since the last annual meeting. This slide represents the total expenditures for each fund. Again, with the information on the previous slide, the fund totals may vary between the draft audit and that unaudited budget so that those amounts are not counted twice so that we avoid overstating any total district expenditures. At the bottom of this slide, you'll see the amount of $65,436,564. This represents the total expenditures of all funds of the school district since the last annual meeting. Our cash balance is $24,602,026 as of June 30th, 2022. And on the slide, you can see the cash balance for the separate funds. Cash balance is only one part of the district's fund balance. Fund balance provides a more complete picture of our financial position because it accounts for all financial assets and liabilities. Our unaudited general fund ending fund balance is $19,153,080, which again is also found on the first page of the budget. Fund balance is important in relation to annual expenditures. General fund balance as a percentage, our general fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is 36.8% as of June 30th. Within the general fund, there are 4 designations, including restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. Sinking funds or funds reserved for our post-employment benefits or funds reserved for construction project completions would be examples of restricted or committed funds. Excuse me. The unassigned assigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is 32% as of June. And just as a reminder, the board has approved an upper limit goal of 28.9%, which has been exceeded the last few years. As Julie just presented, the current budget does include deficit spending, which will draw down the fund balance. Here are the unaudited fund balances for the remaining funds as of June 30th. And again, these can be found on the budget document. Here, oops, excuse me. Here we go. Okay. A surplus occurs when revenues received during the budget year are greater than the expenditures. There is a general fund surplus to report for 21-22. Again, on the unaudited budget, total revenues and other financing sources indicated $53,397,795, with total expenditures and other finances listing as $52,024,131. The difference between these two is $61,773, which represents our unaudited 21-22 general fund surplus. While a budget surplus was not initially budgeted, both actual revenues exceeded budgeted revenue, as well as actual expenditures exceeded expenditure budget, which resulted in that surplus. The balance sheet and our auditor's financial statements show an all funds year-end total liability of $4,943,903. These liabilities are equivalent to outstanding bills and obligations payable by the district and can include account payable to vendors, accrued payroll liabilities, which we just note has increased due to our change in allowing teacher electing 26 pays. Also, deposits payable or unearned revenue. The district has sufficient current cash and or receivable revenues to cover these expenses. Later in tonight's agenda, a recommended action will be presented on the tax levy for the 22-23 school year. The recommended tax levy amount of $19,967,582 was just presented earlier by Julie at the budget hearing. The district's debt at the end of the 21-22 year is $19,535,000. By state law, the district's debt cannot exceed 10% of the equalized value of the school district under Section 67.03(1)(b). The 2020 equalized value of the district was $2 billion. Just making sure, $230,154,931. So 10% of that equalized value is $223,015,493. From there, we would deduct the long-term debt. We would add in the debt service fund balance, which would leave the district with a margin of indebtedness of $206,678,276. Julie just mentioned two outstanding bond issues we have. The first being the 2020 refunded debt, primarily issued to build Prairie View Elementary. This debt is maturing with a final principal and interest payment due April 1st, 2024. The second is the 2019 Holmen High School addition and remodel, with this debt currently maturing with the final principal and interest payment due April 1st of 2030. And again, we practice debt defeasance to prepay debt when feasible, reducing total term and interest, reducing debt taxes. Total principal and interest due for year 22-23 is shown on the slide. The Moody's investment rating is a lagging indicator that measures the district's financial stability. This is similar or would be similar to a personal credit score. For districts bonding to fund construction or improvements, a high Moody's rating is important as it positively influences the interest rate on the bonds. And again, you can see our rating here of AA2. Comparative per pupil expenditures is also a lagging indicator that measures financial resources that were applied to deliver services directly to students. Comparative amounts exclude costs from expenditures such as transportation, capital, debt, or miscellaneous. This measure more specifically accounts for controllable costs directly associated with serving students. Next, we'll review in more detail the draft financial statements and independent auditor's report. This information was previously presented to members of administration and the Finance Committee. An unmodified opinion was received on the financial statements and the federal and state awards. And as shown, just a reminder again that the statements have been updated to include the new lease reporting requirements. A modified opinion is said to be unmodified when the auditor concludes the financial statements give a true and fair view in accordance with financial reporting framework used for the preparation and presentation of the financial statements. Again, we want to receive that unmodified opinion from our auditor. The following pages are from the draft financial statements for the audit of the 21-22 fiscal year. You'll see demonstrated the unmodified report for our financial statements. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified. However, there was one non-compliance noted, which I will address on an upcoming slide. This page represents the unmodified opinion regarding our federal awards. Again, no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified. And these pages represent the state awards, again, unmodified opinion. Our audit was classified as low risk. Here we address the noncompliance finding that was noted in our financial statements, which related to our actual expenditures being more than our budgeted expenditure amount. There were unforeseen circumstances at the end of the year that required our actual expenditures to exceed the budget. The technology items that were expected to arrive into the next school year were delivered in June, along with the urgent HVAC needs, as Julie had mentioned, at several of our buildings that needed to be addressed immediately. This was an isolated incident, meaning it was not a prior year audit finding. The district closely monitors the budget and formally amends it when necessary. And the district will continue to amend the budget to ensure actual expenditures do not exceed the budget. As we near completion of our 21-22 audit, the bulleted items will be finalized. The Management's Discussion and Analysis, or MDA, provides analysis in a non-technical format that gives insight into trends and provides a narrative for reading and comprehending the information presented. This MDA is written by district staff and is incorporated into the report provided by the auditor. The report will not be complete until all financial statements are completed. It's generally in the fall that the State of Wisconsin Retirement Fund provides the district and the auditor with pension fund liability information as of June 30th. In addition to preparing the statements, the auditor also provides the district a management letter, which has not yet been received. Copies of the report are shared with board members once the financial statements have been finalized by the auditor. A copy of the complete audit report will then be made available to the public via the district website. Are there any questions about the audit report or the treasurer's report presented? Thank you.
Moving on to item 8, we will continue on to agenda item 8, new business. On the handout available as you entered, there are sample motions listed for these items. And I just want to remind folks that if you want to make a motion or you have comments or questions during discussion, then please come to the microphone to do so. So item 8.1 is to set the annual salaries of the school board members for the 22-23 school year. I would note that handout provides information regarding 21-22 board salaries and comparative data for your reference. Would anyone like to make a motion? Please come forward.
Anita Jagosinski, I live in town of Holland. I'd like to make a motion to set the salaries of the school board members at $3,450 per year with no payments for special meetings, so a total of $3,450 per year. Can I explain the reasoning behind that now, or do you want me to wait until there's a second?
We'll wait for a second.
Okay.
Do we have a second to that motion? Please come forward.
Cheryl Hancock, the Village of Holmen, and I second that motion.
Okay. The reasoning is currently the board members make $2,910 for their salary plus $52.20 per special meeting, and they have 10 special meetings average per year. So the total of those two, which combines salary and special meetings, is $3,432. So I'm just rounding up to $3,450 because it was a more even number. So basically an $18 raise in what they are currently receiving. And also statutorily, I understand there's a statute that states that board members may not be paid a salary plus per meetings. You have to have one or the other. So this actually would help meet that state statute.
Thank you, Anita. Is there any other discussion? One more time, any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to item 8.2, the reimbursement of school board members' expenses. Would anyone like to make a motion? Please come forward.
I'm Rick Hayden from the Township of Farmington. I move that authorize the payment of the actual necessary expenses of a school board member when traveling in the performance of duties.
Is there a second to the motion?
Brian Wolpett, Village of Holmen, I second that motion.
There is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion?
I would just say, Rick Hayden again, in terms of doing your job, traveling to different areas is generally necessary. I do it for my own work, and those expenses are covered by my employer. We're asking these volunteers to do work on their own behalf. They shouldn't have to pay out of their own pocket or their family's pocket to do, advance the school district's initiative. So that's a reason for saying that.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, and the third time, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next is the recommendation of the property tax levy for the 2022-23 school year. Anyone like to make a motion?
Barb Wench, Town of Holland. I move to recommend a tax levy for the 22-23 school year in the amount of $19,967,582 upon all taxable property in the School District of Holmen for the purposes of operating and maintaining the school district, schools, community service programs, and for paying the debt for school projects.
Okay, is there a second on this motion?
Gary Jagosinski, Town of Holland, I second that motion.
Okay, there is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Any discussion on this motion? And a third time, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next is the authorization for short-term borrowing. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Patrick Barlow, Village of Holmen. I would move to authorize the district to borrow up at $1 million for the 2022-23 school year for short-term purposes.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second on this motion?
Brian Wopat, Village of Holmen, I second the motion.
Okay, there is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, and third time, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to the disposal of tangible personal property. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Cheryl Hancock, the Village of Holmen. I move to approve the disposal of tangible personal property.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second on this motion?
Chris Lau, Village of Holmen, I second that motion.
Okay, there is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on this motion?
Can you describe what tangible personal property, what's the range and limits on that?
It's governed by board policy, so I don't know the limits off the top of my head. An example for items that would become property, we have limits of $50,000 without bid, 3 quotes, and $100,000 with competitive bid, but disposal is much less than that. Might be best if we pull up the limits on disposal of. If it does not have value, Dr. Mueller, by board determination, can dispose of, and then we have different ways of disposing. For example, if we have excess computer property, we could look at low-income students that may need those devices at home, and that's authorized through our technology department. If we have other things that do not have value on the market, we can recycle or dispose of those. And then anything else that does have value would have to go to public sale so that it's equally available to anybody in the public to bid through auction. That's available either locally through advertising to the public or on auction sites, the state of Wisconsin auction site, which is also then available to the public. Do you want me to pull up that disposal policy? For thresholds?
The term personal property, this isn't individual's property, this is property of
This is property purchased with public dollars. Yes.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this motion? Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item 8.6 is to set the date and time of the 2023 annual meeting or authorize the school board to set the date and time. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Patrick Barlow, Village of Holmen, I move to set the date of the 2023 annual meeting and budget hearing to be set for October 23rd, 2023.
Is there a second to this motion?
Chris Lau, Village of Holmen, I will second that.
Okay, there is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Any discussion on this motion? The third time, any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Moving on to 8.7, is there any other business that needs to come forth as permitted at this annual meeting?
This is Francis Brown from Tonawanda, Alaska. I'm used to going to several board meetings, and they have this citizens' concerns, which I think is a good idea. But now they have it so it has to be something connected with what's on the agenda for that night. And I think 90% of the time, parents or anybody with citizen concern would not be on the agenda. 2 years ago, I brought up about the trees hiding Don Jacobs' name after you're honoring him, and they took care of it. So how long would I have to wait for that would be on the agenda? So I think if that needs a motion or not, but I would move that they make it much easier for a citizen concern.
Is there any?
I mean, that is a motion that does not tie in with any statutory power of the annual meeting, per se.
Okay. So, go ahead.
We have a policy 870 that's suggestion concerns, public concerns, and so anytime someone has a concern, they are able to talk with the person it most directly relates to in the district, and we do our best to take care of it promptly so we don't even have to wait for a board meeting to occur also. So just for information. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other business that needs to come forth that's permitted at the annual meeting? And a third time, any other business that needs to come forth that's permitted by this annual meeting? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the next item. Before we adjourn, I want to take a moment to thank you all for coming tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Chris Lau, Village of Holmen, I move to adjourn the meeting.
All right, thank you. No second is needed. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We'll be taking about a 5 to 10 minute break, and we will then resume with the regular board meeting.